I need you to sit down for this one, because I am about to tell you about the night I convinced a woman I could cook on our very first date and then spent the next 40 minutes proving in real time in her kitchen with her watching exactly how wrong that claim was. This story ends with a fire alarm, a phone call to my mother that she will never let me forget, and a date that somehow, against every law of logic, asked to see me again. Stay with me, because the middle part of this story is genuinely one of the worst 20 minutes of my adult life. So here is some important context. I cannot cook, not in the charming, self-deprecating way people say that when they actually mean they are decent but modest. I cannot cook in the literal sense. My signature dish is toast. Sometimes I add butter. That is the ceiling of my abilities. But I had matched with this girl online and we had been talking for about 2 weeks, and at some point in our conversation, she mentioned that she loved cooking, that her ideal partner would cook with her, and that she found it deeply unattractive when a man couldn't handle himself in a kitchen. Her words, deeply unattractive. Now, the smart thing to do here would have been to say, honestly, cooking is not my strong suit, but I'd love to learn. Simple, honest, endearing even. What I actually typed back was, oh, I love cooking. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. I have never cooked a single meal that did not come from a packet with instructions printed on the back. She got excited. She said, and I quote, "We should cook together sometime. That would be so fun." And because I had already committed to this lie, and because backing out at that point would have required admitting I'd been lying for an entire conversation, I said, definitely, I'd love that. I want you to notice that I did not just tell one lie. I built a small structure of lies and then agreed to host a live demonstration of that structure to a stranger. 2 days later, she suggested we do exactly that for our first date, cook dinner together at her place. Her treat, she said, since I was clearly the expert and she wanted to learn a few things. I sat there staring at that message for a full 2 minutes, deciding whether to fake a family emergency for the rest of my natural life. I did not fake a family emergency. I said, sounds great, can't wait. I want you to really feel the next 48 hours with me, because they were chaos. I watched cooking videos like I was preparing for a final exam I had no business taking. I watched a video on how to dice an onion 4 times and still could not have explained it to you afterward. I bought a cookbook. I read it like a thriller novel, deeply invested, understanding almost none of it. I practiced cutting vegetables in my own kitchen at midnight, cut my finger twice, and texted my best friend in a full panic that simply said, "I think I've made a terrible mistake." He replied, "What did you do?" Not a question, a statement, like he already knew it was bad. I told him everything. The lie, the date, the cooking demonstration I was now expected to perform live. He laughed at me for what felt like an unreasonably long time before finally offering one piece of advice. He said, "Just make pasta. You cannot mess up pasta." Reader, I want you to remember that sentence because it becomes extremely important later. You cannot mess up pasta. So, the night arrives. I show up at her apartment with a bag of groceries that I had picked very carefully based entirely on what looked simple in the cooking videos. Garlic, butter, pasta, a jar of sauce that I planned to claim I made from scratch if asked, and some fresh basil because it looked impressive in photos. She opens the door. She is lovely, genuinely lovely, warm, excited. She says, "I'm so glad we're doing this. I never get to cook with someone who actually knows what they're doing." And in that exact moment, standing in her doorway, holding a bag of groceries I barely understood, I felt the full weight of the disaster I had built for myself. We get into the kitchen. She says, "Okay, chef, lead the way. What are we making?" "Chef," she called me chef. I said, with a confidence I did not feel even slightly, "Garlic butter pasta. Simple, but it's all about technique. It's all about technique." I had heard someone say that in a video. I had no idea what it meant. I was simply repeating words like a parrot that had recently watched too much cooking content. She started boiling water. I started on the garlic because that's what the video showed first. I picked up a knife. I looked at the garlic. I looked at the knife. And I genuinely, for a second, forgot which part of the garlic you were supposed to peel. She must have noticed something in my face because she said, gently, "Do you want me to do the garlic? You focus on the sauce." And because I am apparently constitutionally incapable of accepting help when I desperately need it, said, No, I've got it. This is the easy part." It was not the easy part. I will spare you the full details of the next 10 minutes, but I will tell you this. The garlic ended up in pieces so large and uneven that one chunk was essentially still a whole clove. I put it in the pan with butter at what I thought was a reasonable heat, but was actually significantly too high. Within 90 seconds, the kitchen filled with the specific, unmistakable smell of burning garlic, which, if you have never experienced it, smells like regret. She looked over and said, casually, not even alarmed yet, "Smells like it's getting a little dark. You might want to turn that down." I said, "It's supposed to do that. It's part of the caramelization process." I do not know what caramelization is. I had heard the word in a video about an entirely different dish. I deployed it with complete confidence and zero understanding, the same way I deploy most of my personality. She gave me a look. A small, polite, slightly confused look. The kind of look you give someone when they've said something that sounds technically correct, but you're not entirely sure they know what it means. The pasta water, meanwhile, had started boiling over because I had put the lid on it and walked away to deal with my garlic crisis. It hissed onto the stove. The smoke detector, sensing both the burning garlic and now the boiling over water creating steam, decided this was the moment to get involved. The alarm went off, loudly, in her small apartment at 7:40 p.m. On our first date, she grabbed a chair, stood on it, and started waving a tea towel at the smoke detector to get it to stop, while I stood there holding a pan of garlic that now resembled small pieces of charcoal, completely frozen, having what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience where I watched myself fail at the one thing I had promised I was good at. The alarm finally stopped. She got down from the chair. She looked at the pan. She looked at me, and she said very calmly, "So, how long have you actually been cooking?" I had two options in that moment. Continue the lie, somehow in the face of overwhelming physical evidence, or tell the truth, standing in a smoke-filled kitchen, holding burnt garlic. On a first date, I had already ruined beyond any reasonable repair. I chose the truth. Finally, painfully late, but I chose it. I said, "I have never cooked a real meal in my life. I told you I loved cooking because you said it was important to you, and I panicked, and I am so sorry. This entire night has been a lie. I am going to throw this garlic away, and I think we should order food." There was a pause, a genuinely terrifying pause, where I assumed she was calculating the fastest way to ask me to leave, and then she laughed, properly laughed. The kind of laugh where she had to put a hand on the counter. She said, I knew the second you picked up that knife like it was a foreign object. I just wanted to see how far you'd take it." She had known the entire time. She had let me set a smoke detector off on purpose just to see how far the lie would go. We ordered pizza. We sat on her kitchen floor because the smoke alarm had made the kitchen feel cursed, in her words, and we ate pizza out of the box and talked for 3 hours. And it ended up being, against every possible prediction I could have made walking in that door, one of the best first dates I've ever had. She did message me afterward. By the way, the message said, "Garlic butter pasta technician, coming through." I have not lived that down. I do not think I ever will. So here is what I learned, for whatever it's worth. The lie was never necessary. She liked honesty more than competence. She liked the fact that I panicked and tried and failed spectacularly far more than she would have liked a man who actually knew how to cook. The thing I was so afraid of, admitting I didn't have a skill she valued, turned out to matter far less than the fact that I lied about it in the first place. The lie was the problem, not the cooking. Also, and I cannot stress this enough, my friend was wrong. You absolutely can mess up pasta. I am living, breathing, smoke detector triggering proof of that. But here is what I genuinely want to know, and I want you to actually answer this one in the comments. If you were on a first date and you got caught in a lie like that, something you said early on to impress someone, and then suddenly had to perform it live, in real time, with no way out, would you keep the lie going as long as possible, the way I did? Or would you come clean the second things started going wrong? Because I think we have all done some version of this. Said we'd seen a movie we hadn't, said we knew a band we'd never actually listened to, claimed a skill in a job interview that we then had to frantically learn over a weekend. Tell me your version. Tell me the lie you told that you then had to live up to. I need to know I am not the only unhinged person doing this. And if this story made you wince and laugh at the same time, that's genuinely the whole point of this channel. Every week, I bring you a new story about someone, usually me, making a series of completely avoidable but deeply human mistakes and somehow surviving them. If you want more of that, subscribe to Crazy Tales, ring the bell so you don't miss the next one, and tell someone who has ever lied about a skill on a first date that this story is for them. I'll see you in the next story, and please, if you don't know how to cook, just say that. Save yourself the smoke alarm